That Christmas Eve, I stood in front of a house I had never been invited to before. It was beautiful cream walls, arched windows, garlands wrapped around white porch columns, and a faint glow of warmth behind frosted glass. I clutched a small gift bag in my gloved hand, trying to ignore the knot in my stomach. It was my father who had sent the text, "Come for dinner. 6 p.m., no explanation, no sentiment, just instructions. And yet, a part of me foolishly hopeful thought maybe this time would be different. When the door opened and I stepped into the grand living room, my grandfather's face lit up like the Christmas tree behind him. "Evelyn, my sweet girl," he exclaimed, pulling me into a tight hug. His cologne smelled of pine and old leather, familiar and grounding. Then he pulled back, looked around, and said with a smile full of pride, "Do you like the new house?" I blinked. My voice caught in my throat. It's beautiful," I said carefully. "But this isn't my house. Grandpa, I don't live here." The silence that followed was immediate and deafening. I saw the color drain from his face. My father shifted uncomfortably. My stepmother forced a tense smile. And I suddenly realized this wasn't just a housewarming dinner. It was the beginning of something much bigger. My name is Evelyn Grace. If you've ever felt like an outsider in your own family, like love was something you had to earn but never deserved, then maybe, just maybe, you'll understand the story I'm about to tell. Because that night, in a house filled with light, the shadows of betrayal finally began to show. I wasn't always this composed when talking about my past. For the longest time, I kept it tucked away like the creaky floorboards of the attic I used to call my bedroom, something people didn't see. And I didn't talk about. My mother, Diana, died giving birth to me. I never knew her, never heard her voice or felt her embrace. All I ever had were fragments of stories told in passing, mostly by my grandfather, Walter Dalton. She was his only child, and to him, I was her last heartbeat. But to my father, I always felt like a walking reminder of his greatest loss. He remarried when I was 3. Her name was Candace, and she entered our lives like a hurricane wrapped in pearls and false sweetness. To the outside world, she was elegant, charming, poised, but inside the walls of our home, her warmth turned icy the moment my father wasn't looking. She never hit me. She didn't need to. Her words did the damage. "You should be grateful we keep you," she would whisper when I spilled something or forgot to fold laundry. "You're not really part of this family. You're just what came with the funeral." When Candace gave birth to my half-brother, Eli, everything changed. He became the sun our world revolved around. I became the shadow. Eli got everything: attention, affection, praise, gifts that came wrapped in silk ribbons. I got hand-me-downs. A narrow bed pushed into the attic, and instructions not to make too much noise during his piano lessons. My room had no heating in the winter. I learned to sleep under layers of worn blankets and breathe into my hands to keep them warm. Sometimes I'd press my ear against the attic floor just to hear what warmth sounded like laughter from the kitchen. Birthday songs sung for Eli, stories told in the living room without me. The only person who ever checked in on me, ever made me feel seen, was Grandpa Walter. He lived in Boston, busy running his construction firm, so he couldn't visit much. But every couple of months, he'd call. His voice was always full of affection and curiosity. "Tell me what you're reading, Evelyn," he'd say. Still drawing in that sketchbook of yours, I'd lie sometimes. Say I was fine, that everything was okay. What was I supposed to say? I live in an attic and they forgot my birthday again. He used to send birthday cards, each one with a crisp $20 bill and a handwritten note. But one year, they stopped. When I asked about them, Candace shrugged and said Grandpa probably forgot, When I brought it up to him during a phone call, he said, confused, "I've been sending them every year." That was the first time I wondered if someone else had been intercepting them. School became my refuge. I buried myself in books and drawings. My teachers said I had a gift, especially in design and structure. "You have an architect's eye," one of them said when I was 12. I held on to that like a lifeline, but even my accomplishments at school went unnoticed at home. When I won first place in a regional art competition, Candace said, "That's nice. Now go do the dishes." When Eli came third in a chess match, they threw a small party. I never felt bitter, just invisible. By 16, I stopped trying to win their approval. I worked after school at a local bookstore, saving every dollar I could. The idea of college felt like a fantasy, but I dreamed about it anyway. I'd cut out brochures and paste them on the wall beside my mattress. MIT, Pratt Institute, RISD, places where creativity meant something, places where I could be someone. When I turned 18, I applied to several universities in secret. I even got accepted into 2 of them with partial scholarships. I was ecstatic. I showed the letters to my father. Hopeful. Maybe. Finally, he'd see me, but he barely looked up from his newspaper. "We can't afford that right now," he said. "Eli's starting private school. We need to prioritize him. He's younger. He has time. He has time." I repeated softly, "And I don't." He didn't answer. Candace simply added, "You can go to community college later, if you really want to, but I never did." There was no money, and more importantly, no belief in me from the people who should have supported me the most. So I stayed in our small Ohio town, working full-time at the bookstore, eventually renting a tiny studio apartment above a dry cleaner. It smelled like starch and steam, but it was mine. I visited home less and less. When I did, it was out of obligation, not affection. Even then, I was treated like a guest. The family photos on the mantel never included me. I once asked Candace about it. "You were never around when we had them taken," she said with a smirk. "Maybe next time." But next time never came. Until one afternoon, out of nowhere, I received a text from my father. "Dinner, Christmas Eve, 6 p.m., new address 517 Elmridge." There was no warmth, no "we miss you," just coordinates and a date. Still, I hesitated. Something inside me whispered, "Don't go." But another part quieter, more wounded, hoped this time would be different, that maybe I'd finally be acknowledged. Included, loved. I wrapped a scarf around a small gift, a hand-drawn sketch of a house I had designed, a blend of Tudor and modern architecture. I had printed it on parchment, framed it in oak. On the back I wrote, "For your new beginnings, Evelyn." It wasn't much, but it was sincere. The house, when I arrived, was like something out of a design magazine. Large front porch, arched entryway, warm light spilling from inside. Everything about it screamed comfort and wealth, a sharp contrast to my drafty studio apartment. I stood outside for a long moment, holding the gift in my hands, unsure whether I was really welcome or just convenient. I rang the bell, and that's when everything began. Candace opened the door with the kind of smile you reserve for neighbors you don't particularly like. Thin, polished, practiced. Her makeup was flawless lipstick, the shade of cranberry wine. Hair curled in perfect waves that framed her face like a magazine cover. "Oh," she said, surprised. "You made it." Not "Hi, Evelyn," not "It's good to see you," just mild surprise, as if I'd walked in off the street uninvited. I forced a smile, held out the small wrapped gift. "Congratulations on the new house," I said. She took it like she was accepting a report card she hadn't asked for. "Well, come in. Dinner's almost ready." I stepped inside and was immediately overwhelmed by the warmth of the house. Hardwood floors gleamed under ambient lights. A chandelier sparkled above the staircase. And in the living room, A massive Christmas tree stood decorated in gold and silver, like it had been styled by professionals. Framed photos lined the hallway. Eli holding a tennis racket, Eli in a blazer on his first day of private school. Eli with Candace and my father, smiling under fireworks. I scanned the faces. Row after row, none of them included me. Of course, in the kitchen, I saw my father. He wore a navy sweater, one I didn't recognize, and poured wine into long-stemmed glasses. When he looked up, our eyes met. There was a flicker of hesitation, then a single nod. "You're here," he said. No smile, no hug. "I brought something," I said, lifting the gift slightly, set it on the table. No warmth, just placement, like I was an object being shelved. They led me to the dining room where a few guests had already arrived. A middle-aged couple I didn't recognize, and a man who looked like a colleague of my father's. They were all well-dressed, sipping wine and laughing about neighborhood zoning regulations and mortgage rates. I sat quietly near the edge of the table, listening but never included. "Where are you living these days?" one woman asked me politely. "Oh, just a small apartment above a dry cleaner, near Birch Street," I replied, trying to sound casual. "Birch Street," she blinked. That's downtown, right?" "Not the safest," Candace quickly interjected. "Tone syrupy and bright. Evelyn's always been fiercely independent. She likes her space." I bit my tongue. Independent was a flattering way to rebrand abandoned. Dinner was served shortly after a perfectly roasted turkey, glazed carrots, cranberry relish that probably took 3 hours to prepare. Eli came bounding down the stairs, taller now, hair styled with gel. He barely glanced at me before hugging Candace and throwing an arm around my father. "Can't wait for Grandpa to see the new house," Eli said as he took his seat. "He's going to flip." "Grandpa," I repeated. "You didn't know," Candace said, sipping her wine. "Walter's flying in tonight. He wanted to surprise us." I swallowed hard. No, I hadn't known. No one told me. I suddenly understood something very clearly. I wasn't invited here because they missed me. I was here to be seen for someone else's benefit. Just like always. The doorbell rang 15 minutes later. And there he was, Grandpa Walter. His presence instantly filled the room, like an orchestra had begun playing in the background. Tall, silver-haired, in a tailored charcoal coat, his voice rich and booming. "Where's my Evelyn?" I stood up slowly. He strode toward me and pulled me into the kind of embrace that made everything else in the world feel quiet. I buried my face into his shoulder for a moment longer than I meant to. "You look just like your mother," he whispered. I nodded, unable to speak. After a round of greetings, he took a slow walk around the house, commenting on the finishes, the paneling, the light fixtures. My father followed him closely, beaming like a man trying to sell something. Then Grandpa turned toward me, gesturing at the arched window in the dining room. "Do you like the house?" "Evelyn," he asked. His eyes sparkled with pride. "It's yours, after all." I felt my chest tighten. What I asked. Startled. "This house," he said again, voice joyful. "Do you like it?" "I wanted it to be a new beginning for you." I blinked. My throat went dry. "Grandpa, I don't live here." There was a pause, then a long, eerie silence. My father's face changed instantly, as if someone had wiped the expression off with a cloth. Candace froze mid-sip. Eli looked from one adult to the other, confused. "What do you mean you don't live here?" Grandpa asked. "I have an apartment," I said, "on Birch Street. I've never lived here. I didn't even know you were coming." He turned toward my father, expression darkening. "Gregory." My father opened his mouth, then closed it. Candace stepped in with that fake laughter she used when cornered. "Oh, Walter. I think there's been a little miscommunication. Evelyn enjoys her independence. We thought it best not to intrude." Grandpa looked at me. Is that true? I shook my head. No, I didn't know anything about this house until I got the dinner text. Another pause. The air seemed heavier than the carved wood chairs we sat in. Then Grandpa turned slowly toward my father and said in a low voice that vibrated with disappointment, 2 years ago, I wired you $400,000. I told you specifically to use it to buy a house for Evelyn, a home something of her own. My father's face drained of color. Candace dropped her fork. I assumed she was living here. Grandpa continued, his voice rising with each word. I trusted you. You even sent me family photos. Photos with her in this house. How dare you? My heart thudded in my ears. Family photos. In this house, then I remembered the last few family gatherings where they insisted I stay for photos. Always after dinner. Always in the living room. Always awkward. They'd used me. Staged my presence for Grandpa's sake. Pretended this was my home. I was the shadow again, but this time, one they'd used as a mask. I felt nauseous. Grandpa turned back to me, voice soft but firm. Evelyn, go pack your things. You're coming to Boston with me. This house, it was meant for you, and it's time we make things right. I couldn't move, couldn't speak, but in that moment, surrounded by expensive chairs and a table dressed in rosemary sprigs and wine glasses, I realized something. The truth had finally come knocking, and it wasn't leaving without me. The silence that followed Grandpa's words felt like a vacuum, like the entire house had forgotten how to breathe. My father sat motionless, staring at the placemat in front of him, jaw clenched so tightly I thought his teeth might crack. Candace blinked rapidly, her face frozen in some strange mixture of panic and calculation. Eli looked like a boy who had wandered into the wrong play and didn't know his lines. I should have felt triumphant. I should have felt vindicated. Instead, I felt hollow. This house was meant for Evelyn, Grandpa repeated, quieter now, but with steel in his voice. And yet she's been living in a shoebox while you and your wife played house with my money. My father finally spoke, voice low and uneven. Dad, I didn't think she'd want to live here. Evelyn's always been independent. There it was again. That word. Independent. Their favorite excuse. Their favorite shield. The way they reframed their absence as my autonomy. Candace added quickly. We thought Eli needed a stable environment to prepare for college. He has so much potential. And Evelyn never, she didn't what Grandpa snapped, rounding on her, didn't deserve it. Is that what you were about to say? Candace's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. I trusted you, Gregory, Grandpa said, his voice shaking now, not with rage, but something worse. Betrayal. You told me she was happy here, that this house gave her space to grow. You sent me photos, lied to me, used my granddaughter like a prop in your show. My father stayed silent, so I stood up. I'll go get my coat, I said. Grandpa turned to me, his expression softening. We'll stay at a hotel tonight. In the morning, we're flying to Boston. I've already made the arrangements. I have to grab a few things from my apartment, I replied, already moving toward the door. It won't take long. Candace stepped forward like she wanted to stop me. Evelyn. Wait, we can talk about this. Can't we? You can't just leave. Why not? I said, meeting her eyes for the first time that evening. You never wanted me here. You just wanted to convince him I was happy so he'd keep sending checks. She had no response. I walked outside into the cold December air, snow swirling gently around the porch lights. My heart pounded, but not from fear, from clarity. For the first time in my life, I wasn't being pulled, I was choosing. Grandpa followed close behind. He didn't say much as we got into his car, a sleek black sedan with heated seats that I didn't dare adjust. His driver, James, nodded respectfully as I slid into the back. "I'm sorry," Grandpa said quietly. Once we were on the road, I should have been paying closer attention. I looked out the window, watching the streetlights pass in golden blurs. "It's not your fault." "It is," he replied. I handed them money and trusted their words. "I should have asked you what you needed, not assumed you were okay." I bit the inside of my cheek to keep the tears from falling. "I just wanted to be enough," I whispered. "Not even loved, just seen." He reached over and placed a gentle hand on mine. "You are enough, Evelyn. You've always been. And from now on, I will make sure you never forget it." We stopped by my apartment, a drafty little studio above a dry cleaner that smelled like starch and disappointment. I gathered my few belongings, a duffel bag with my sketchbooks, a stack of design books with frayed covers, 2 pairs of worn jeans, and my grandmother's necklace, something I kept hidden in a tin box under my mattress. It was the only thing of hers I'd ever received. Candace said it was too old-fashioned to be useful. By midnight, we were checked into a quiet hotel outside the city. Grandpa insisted I take the king-size bed while he took the adjoining suite. I lay awake for hours, staring at the ceiling, wondering what it would feel like to start over. We flew to Boston the next morning. The airport was buzzing with holiday travelers. But in the quiet bubble of first class, I felt strangely calm. Grandpa read the Wall Street Journal, occasionally glancing over to check on me. I sipped tea slowly, fingers wrapped tightly around the warm cup. It still didn't feel real. I thought of the night before, of Candace's sharp inhale, of my father's hollow silence, of Eli's lost expression. For years, I had begged for scraps from their table. And now I had walked away from the entire meal. Boston was colder than Ohio, but somehow less biting. Grandpa's driver picked us up at the airport and drove through a maze of beautiful old neighborhoods, Victorian homes with ivy-covered walls, brownstones nestled side by side, and wide boulevards dressed in twinkling lights. Then we turned down a long, tree-lined lane. At the end of the drive stood a massive home, 3 stories, brick and stone, with white shutters and warm light glowing from every window, wreaths hung on every door. A dusting of snow sat delicately on the rooftop, like icing on a cake. "This is home," Grandpa said. "Home." The word hit me like a tremor. He opened the door for me himself. Inside, the foyer stretched wide, with polished mahogany floors and a grand staircase that split in 2 directions. A crystal chandelier glittered overhead. To the left was a study. To the right, a sitting room with a fireplace already lit. I followed him up the stairs in stunned silence. "This is your room," he said, pushing open a door. It was larger than my entire apartment. A 4-poster bed, a soft rug the color of pale moss, a large window that overlooked the garden, a walnut desk, shelves empty and waiting, and on the desk, a brand new laptop. "I don't know what to say," I whispered. "You don't have to say anything," Grandpa replied. "You just have to live." I stepped inside, dropped my bag, and sat on the edge of the bed. My fingers curled into the blanket, testing the softness, half wondering if I'd wake up. He knelt in front of me. "Evelyn, from this point forward, you're not just surviving, you're building. You have space to dream now, and I'll be right here. Every step." I nodded, my throat too tight to speak. For the first time in my life, I wasn't begging for space in someone else's story. I had been given a chapter of my own. The days that followed felt like waking up from a very long, very cruel dream. I tried to settle into the new rhythms of Boston Grandpa's house, the thick layers of snow outside, the soft classical music that played in the mornings, and the way the staff greeted me like I belonged. Every time I walked downstairs and someone asked how I'd slept, or if I wanted cocoa or tea, something inside me bristled. Not because I was ungrateful, but because I didn't know how to receive kindness without suspicion. Grandpa never rushed me. He let me be quiet when I needed, talk when I was ready. It was one afternoon, maybe 5 days after I arrived, that he invited me out to lunch. A small restaurant near his office, downtown, marble tables, soft lighting, the kind of place where the silverware is heavy and you lower your voice without knowing why. He didn't order wine. He looked serious. His fingers tapped lightly against the linen napkin in his lap. "Evelyn," he said gently, "there's more we need to talk about." I nodded, sensing this wasn't just a lunch. It was a reckoning. "I've been speaking with my lawyer," he continued, "and reviewing some documents, bank records, emails, transfers. I stayed still." He took a breath. "The money I gave Gregory 2 years ago, for the house, wasn't the first time?" I tilted my head. "What do you mean I've been sending money to him since you were a child?" "Ever since Diana, your mother, passed, I wanted to make sure you had what you needed. I sent money for school, clothes, birthdays, every year. The floor beneath me shifted. I didn't get any of that." I said, my voice barely audible. "I know," he said quietly, "and that's the part that makes me sick." I stared at the candle flickering between us. It all started to make sense why I always wore secondhand clothes, why I never got new supplies for school, why my birthdays were forgotten. I used to think they were just negligent, but now I realized it was theft. Calculated. Deliberate theft. "He took it," I whispered, "all of it." Grandpa nodded. "He kept telling me you were doing fine, that you didn't need more, that you were quiet and independent. I trusted him. I had no idea he was using the money for his own life. For Candace. For Eli." I clenched my fists beneath the table. So while I was boiling pasta on a hot plate in a studio apartment, they were throwing birthday parties for Eli with my money. Grandpa didn't speak. "He bought that house with my future," I said, louder now, "and made me stand in front of a camera like some orphan they were pretending to shelter. I thought I was just unwanted, but I was being used." People at nearby tables glanced over. I didn't care. I pushed back my chair slightly and leaned forward. "What are you going to do?" Grandpa was quiet for a moment. Then he looked at me with a kind of sadness that felt bottomless. "I was going to sue him. File charges. Reclaim the house. The money. Make it public. And now I don't want to do anything without you," he said. "You're the one who was hurt. You get to decide what justice looks like." My hands trembled slightly. I looked at my reflection in the polished silver spoon beside my plate. I barely recognized the girl staring back. She looked older than I remembered. Sharper. A part of me wanted revenge, wanted Gregory humiliated, Candace exposed, Eli forced to see the truth. I imagined them evicted from that house, the neighbors whispering, the shame coating everything. But another part of me, another part was so tired. "I don't want courtrooms," I said finally. "I don't want lawyers or lawsuits or articles in the paper." Grandpa looked at me, brows furrowed. "Are you sure you're entitled to—" "I know," I interrupted, "but I'm not doing this to get back at them. I want to build something for me now. I don't want my new life to be an extension of their mess. I don't want their names in the same sentence as my future." He nodded slowly, the corners of his mouth pulling into something almost like admiration. "That's brave." "No," I said, "it's just peace." He placed a hand over mine. "Then we'll cut them off. Entirely? No more money? No access to anything under my name? If they fall, they fall." I looked at him. "Let them." That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat at the walnut desk in my room, a blank page in front of me, pencil in hand. But I couldn't sketch. Not yet. I stared out the window instead, watching snow fall in the back garden. Gentle and slow, like the world was trying to wash itself clean. I kept replaying Candace's voice in my head. Eli has potential. I had potential too. The difference was, no one bet on mine. I had carved it from nothing. A week later, Grandpa helped me list the Hollow Creek house. He made it clear to the lawyer it was bought with money intended for Evelyn. It will now serve her future. I didn't go back to pack it up. I didn't want to see the kitchen I was never allowed to cook in, or the fireplace I was never invited to sit near. When it sold, I cried not because I missed it, but because I didn't. With the money, I applied to the Boston School of Architecture. I submitted a portfolio of sketches, models, and a personal essay about what home means. I didn't write about square footage or crown molding. I wrote about warmth, belonging, windows that let in light, stairs that didn't creak like secrets. When the acceptance letter arrived, I screamed so loudly the house staff thought something had broken. I ran to Grandpa's office, waving the letter like a golden ticket. He read it once, then pulled me into a hug so tight it made up for 1,000 hollow birthdays. Classes began in early spring. I was older than most of the students in my program, but that didn't bother me. I had waited for this, fought for it. Every building I passed on campus, every blueprint I unrolled in class, felt like a piece of myself I was reclaiming. I was also interning at Grandpa's company, Dalton & Co., construction. He didn't give me a special title or cushy desk. I started in project planning, taking notes, reviewing permits, shadowing site engineers. He told me, "You'll earn your place, not because you're my granddaughter, but because you're good." I wanted that. The work was exhausting but satisfying. I stayed late most nights, sometimes sketching my own ideas after hours. Grandpa occasionally peeked over my shoulder, saying things like, "You've got her hands," or "That's Diana's line work." Those moments meant everything. But the truth is, I didn't heal all at once. Some nights I'd still dream of the attic, of that bed with the springs poking my ribs, of standing at the bottom of the stairs, listening to laughter I wasn't part of. I'd wake up drenched in sweat, unsure if I belonged here, afraid that it would all disappear. Grandpa noticed. One night, we sat by the fireplace, no wine, just 2 mugs of tea and a silence that felt safe. "I found something," he said. Reaching into a drawer, he handed me a photograph, a young woman with kind eyes, holding a baby. "Your mother," he said softly. "And you." My breath caught. I had never seen this image before. "She wanted the world for you," he added. "She would have been so proud of the woman you're becoming." Tears slipped down my cheeks, not from sadness, but from the overwhelming realization that I wasn't starting from nothing. I was continuing something she began. That night, I opened my sketchbook and drew a house. It wasn't big, it wasn't fancy, but it had a wide staircase, a kitchen filled with windows, and a small attic, but only for books and fairy lights, not for children. At the bottom of the page, I wrote in soft pencil, "No one here is invisible." If you had told the version of me from a year ago that I'd be studying architecture in Boston, interning at one of the most respected construction firms in the city, and coming home to a house where someone actually waited up to ask how my day was, she would have laughed, not from joy, from disbelief. But here I was, living a version of my life that didn't feel borrowed or staged. It was mine. Classes at the Boston School of Architecture were challenging. Blueprints, CAD software, model building, structural engineering, my brain constantly hummed with equations and sketches. I was surrounded by students several years younger than me, many from wealthy backgrounds with private art tutors and designer laptops. For the first few weeks, I felt like an imposter in every room I stepped into. But then something unexpected happened. They listened. In one of our studio critiques, I presented a sustainable micro-housing model designed for displaced youth, compact, modular, and affordable. My hands trembled as I spoke, but my voice didn't break. Afterward, The professor called it emotionally intelligent architecture, and I nearly cried that night. Grandpa and I had dinner together, just the two of us in the formal dining room that used to intimidate me. I told him what the professor had said, and he smiled behind his wine glass. "You design for people. Evelyn, that's rarer than you think." I began to believe that maybe, just maybe, I wasn't just trying to prove myself anymore. I was becoming someone new. Outside of school, the internship at Dalton & Co. kept me grounded in reality. While my classmates debated color theory, I was walking construction sites with engineers, taking notes on insulation thickness and rebar placement. I learned to read building permits, file zoning applications, and prepare pre-construction reports. It wasn't glamorous, but I soaked up every detail like a sponge. The staff there treated me kindly, but never with special treatment. If anything, they expected more from me. "You're the boss's granddaughter," one of the site managers once joked. "That means you'll be twice as prepared or you won't last 2 days." So I made sure I was prepared. Every meeting, every task, every late-night spreadsheet. I stayed behind after others clocked out, reorganizing reports or scribbling new ideas for housing layouts. Some of those late nights, Grandpa would peek into the office and smirk. "You know, being impressive isn't a full-time job," he'd say. "Maybe not," I'd reply. "But healing kind of is." Despite the new life forming around me, the past hadn't completely let go. Sometimes I still walked into rooms bracing for judgment, still hesitated before speaking, afraid my ideas wouldn't matter. Still had dreams where Candace called me a burden, where my father told me to be grateful for what you get. But those memories had lost their sharpness. They were fading, slowly like pencil marks rubbed out but never quite erased. One morning, while reorganizing project files, I came across a submission request for a national student architecture competition. The theme was Foundations Designing Spaces of Belonging. I stared at the title for a long time. I knew what belonging felt like now, but more importantly, I knew what not belonging had done to me. So I entered. I worked on the submission for weeks. My design was a small community village made up of modular homes, each one designed to be self-sufficient but interconnected. Communal kitchens, shared gardens, solar panels, ramps instead of stairs. It wasn't just architecture. It was a statement. At the center of the plan, I included something that hadn't been in the original brief, a memory room, a place where people could leave behind or preserve a piece of their story, a photograph, a quote, a drawing, proof that they existed, that they mattered. When I submitted it, I didn't expect anything. I just needed to get it out of me. Around that same time, Emma entered my life. We met at the university cafe after she saw me struggling with a broken laptop charger. She handed me hers without hesitation, then stayed to chat about the mess that was our semester. Emma was bright, quick-witted, the kind of person who laughed at her own jokes and wasn't afraid to challenge professors during lectures. She was studying landscape design but had dreams of creating healing gardens in low-income neighborhoods. We clicked instantly. Over time, she became my closest friend. The first person I'd ever confided in about everything, not just the edited version of my childhood, but the attic, the favoritism, the staged photos, the betrayal. One night, we were sitting on a park bench wrapped in scarves, sipping spiced cider, when she said something I never forgot. "You're not broken, Evelyn. You were just, misplaced. But now you're exactly where you need to be." I nodded, holding back tears. Because for once, I didn't feel like a visitor in my own life. A month later, I received an email. Subject line: "Congratulations, finalist for National Student Design Award." I blinked at the screen, read it once, then again, then a third time, because my brain refused to believe it. My design had made the final 3. The award ceremony would be held in Chicago, a city I had never seen. but one that loomed in my imagination as a symbol of power and scale. The competition offered not just a cash prize, but the chance for mentorship under a renowned architectural firm and potential real-world implementation. When I told Grandpa, he set down his newspaper and stood up slowly, as if absorbing the weight of the moment. "You're going to change lives," he said simply. "Not just with buildings, but with the story behind them." And that's when I realized something important. I didn't need revenge to heal. I didn't need Gregory to apologize, or Candace to feel shame, or Eli to acknowledge me. What I needed, what I was building, was a legacy that started from truth, from endurance, from me. The house they took wasn't the end of my story. It was just the echo that made me listen more closely to my own voice. And now, I was speaking with architecture. With every line I drew, I was rewriting the blueprint of who I was. Not forgotten, not excluded, but seen. And finally, standing on my own foundation. The day the letter arrived, the sky was the color of unwashed chalk. I remember because I had just finished preparing a small presentation at Grandpa's company, my first real pitch for a sustainability-focused townhouse concept. I was proud, nervous, but proud. When I got home, James handed me the envelope, delivered by courier. No return address. The handwriting was familiar, neat, measured, almost afraid. I didn't have to open it to know it was from Gregory. Still, I did. "Evelyn, I know I have no right to ask for your time, but I'm writing to ask it anyway. We've lost the house, the one on Hollow Creek. After you sold it, things unraveled fast. I lost my job. Candace tried to start an online business, but nothing worked. Eli dropped out of school. We've moved twice since. The place we're in now is small, too small, and it's falling apart. Eli's struggling, more than you know. He's lost, depressed, angry. He needs help, and you're the only one who might still care. I know I made mistakes, many, some unforgivable, but I hope maybe you can still see us as family. Gregory." I folded the letter slowly, slid it back into the envelope, and stared at it like it might combust in my hand. My chest was tight, not from sadness, but from something sharper clarity. For years, I had lived in the shadows of that house, of his choices. I had begged to be seen, to be included, to be called family. And now, when everything had fallen apart, suddenly I mattered. Not because they missed me, because they needed something from me. I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I just sat on the edge of the window bench in Grandpa's study and breathed in the silence. That evening, I showed him the letter. He read it wordlessly, then handed it back to me. "What do you want to do?" he asked. His question didn't carry pressure, only trust. "I want to do nothing." I said, "I don't want to respond. I don't want to go backwards." He nodded slowly. "Then you don't. But the past rarely listens." 3 days later, while I was walking through Boston Common with Emma bundled in coats and catching snowflakes on our sleeves, I got a call from an unknown Ohio number. I ignored it. Then another came the next day. Then a voicemail. It was Candace. Her voice had changed. Softer, hoarse. "Evelyn, it's me, Candace. I know you probably don't want to hear from me. I wouldn't either if I were you. But Eli, he's not okay. He got into trouble. He's been hanging with people who drink, who steal. He was arrested for shoplifting last week. He's on probation now. Please, just if you could talk to him. He still looks up to you, more than he admits." I listened twice, not because I was swayed, but because part of me needed to hear the fall, the unraveling of the perfect image they used to protect, the cracks they once covered with staged photos and forced smiles. I hadn't been part of that image, but now they wanted me to fix it. I met with Grandpa the next morning over breakfast. "Do you think I'm cold for not helping?" I asked. He set down his mug. I think you're finally helping yourself. I nodded. But you're also not heartless, he added. Which is why you're asking? I don't want to punish Eli, I admitted. He was a child, like I was. But part of me wonders, does he even remember how cruel he was? How he used to call me the upstairs ghost? How he laughed when I cried, Grandpa's jaw tightened. You don't owe him an answer or a lifeline, but do I owe him a mirror, I asked? He looked at me, understanding dawning in his eyes. A week later, I drove back to Ohio, not to stay, not to rescue, to speak. I didn't tell them I was coming. I didn't bring gifts. I just showed up at the small apartment address listed in Gregory's letter. The building was faded brick, the windows fogged from the inside. Peeling numbers marked the door. Candace opened it. Her eyes widened with disbelief. She looked older, thinner. She didn't smile. Evelyn, she breathed. You came. Not for you, I said gently. For myself. Eli appeared behind her, hoodie pulled over messy hair, shadows under his eyes. He looked nothing like the golden boy from their photos. He looked tired. I stepped inside. The living room was cramped, the carpet frayed, dishes stacked in the sink. Eli avoided my gaze. Why now, I asked him. He shrugged. Because I thought maybe you'd understand. Understand what it's like to feel like you're drowning. I exhaled. Steady. I do understand. But the difference is, I learned how to swim while everyone else stood on the shore and laughed. He looked up then, eyes shining. I didn't know. He said, back then, I didn't realize how bad it was for you. I know. I replied, you were a child, but so was I, and no one stepped in for me. Silence. I'm not here to save you. Eli, I said, but I'll say this. No one is coming to rescue you. Not me, not Grandpa, not the version of Mom and Dad that existed in your head. You want change? You start it? He nodded slowly. Okay. Candace didn't speak again. I turned to leave. As I stepped out into the cold again, I felt strangely light. Closure wasn't always dramatic. Sometimes it was simply the act of showing up, not to reopen the door, but to close it from your side. When I got back to Boston, the air felt different. I had left in winter's chill, but something had shifted while I was gone. The snow still covered the sidewalks in soft drifts, but there was a certain warmth in the city lights now, like everything I had been building was beginning to take root. Even if I hadn't noticed it growing, I didn't tell Grandpa much about the trip. Just that I went. Said what I needed to say and didn't stay long. He nodded once, offering no judgment, no probing questions, just quiet support. That was his way. The kind of love that stood behind you, not over you. Life returned quickly to its rhythm school. Internship, late nights sketching by the window with a mug of cocoa nearby. But something had changed in me. I felt lighter, like a weight I'd carried for years, one shaped like silence. Resentment and longing had finally been set down. And in that space, something new began to bloom. Community. It started small. A group project with 3 other students turned into weekly study nights. Then group chats, then spontaneous dinners in the shared kitchen of the campus dorms. Even though I didn't live there, they always saved me a seat. Emma, of course, was at the center of it all. She brought energy into every room like sunlight, and in her orbit, I found ease with her. I didn't have to be the girl who used to live in an attic, or the one whose dad stole her future. I was just Evelyn, smart, capable, funny, when I let myself be. One night, after a long study session, Emma and I were walking back through Beacon Hill, our boots crunching over salt-strewn sidewalks. You're glowing, she said, nudging me. I think it's just the street lamp. No, she grinned. It's you. You've changed. In the best way. I looked up at the sky, cloudy, but full of quiet promise. I think I'm finally becoming someone I'd like to know. At Dalton & Co., I was given more responsibility. Grandpa had always said he wouldn't hand me anything I didn't earn, and he meant it. But he also knew when to step back and let me lead. One morning, he walked into the office holding a rolled-up set of blueprints. "I've got something for you," he said, setting them on my desk. I unrolled them carefully. It was a blank site outline. "What is this?" I asked. "A pilot project. My firm just secured the land outside Cambridge. Small lot, not flashy, but the board's agreed to back a new affordable housing unit, and I want you to design it." My heart nearly stopped. "Me," I breathed. "The whole thing." He nodded. "From the ground up. You've proven you understand how to build for people, not just for praise. I want to see what you do when you have creative control." I sat back, stunned. He leaned on the desk, eyes kind. Call it a graduation gift, or better yet, a beginning. For weeks, I poured my soul into that project. I named it the Foundry, a place where lives could be reshaped, restored, reborn. The design focused on beauty and simplicity, warm wood, natural light, adaptable spaces, and communal gardens. Every unit had built-in bookshelves and big windows. Every door opened to more than just a hallway, it opened to possibility. Emma helped with the landscape concept. We spent evenings at the dining room table, sprawled with sketches and notes, laughing over takeout and arguing about whether rosemary or lavender made better border plants. "It's more than a building," she said one night, tracing her finger across my drawing. "It's a blueprint for healing." I smiled. Then it's doing what it was meant to. Around that time, I got news I hadn't expected. My submission for the national student competition, the community village with the memory room, had won. Not just placed, won. The official letter came with an invitation to speak at the awards ceremony in Chicago. The same city where I once imagined dreams happened only to other people. I flew there with Grandpa. He sat in the front row, beaming as I stepped onto the stage in a simple black dress, holding notes I barely glanced at. My speech wasn't rehearsed, it was honest. "I used to think home was a place someone gave you," I said. "Now I understand. Home is something you build from truth, from pain, from resilience, brick by brick, room by room." The crowd stood when I finished, and in that moment, I didn't feel like someone who had escaped a painful past. I felt like someone who had transformed it. The following spring, construction began on the Foundry. I visited the site nearly every day, hard hat on, clipboard in hand, boots covered in dust. I talked to the contractors, checked supply orders, walked through half-framed units, and envisioned laughter filling those walls. I was 24, and I was finally building something real. On the day the foundation was poured, I stood beside the construction crew and pressed my palm into the wet cement, right at the edge of the courtyard. Next to my handprint, I wrote one word: enough, because I was enough to belong, enough to lead, enough to define my future on my own terms. Back at home that night, Grandpa opened a bottle of wine and made his signature chicken marsala, something I had only ever eaten at restaurants before living with him. We ate in the kitchen, not the formal dining room, surrounded by post-it notes and half-sketched floor plans. He raised his glass. "To your mother," he said, "to her vision and your strength." We toasted in silence. Then he added, "She would have loved you, fiercely. I hope I'm making her proud." He smiled. "You are. More than you know." And just like that, the girl in the attic, the one no one thought to include in the family photo, the one who brought her own seat to the table because no one set one for her, she became a builder. Not just of homes, but of belonging, of legacy, of a life she no longer had to survive. 2 years after that Christmas dinner after the letter, the confrontation, the move to Boston, the new school, the community, and the Foundry, I stood once again in front of an unfamiliar door. Only this time, it wasn't a door I dreaded. It was the front entrance to the first completed unit of the foundry. The metal handle was still wrapped in protective tape, and the windows shimmered with a freshness only new glass has inside. The walls were painted in soft earth tones, the light fixtures simple but warm. There was no luxury here, but there was dignity, and that made all the difference. I ran my hand along the hallway edge, fingertips grazing over the clean trim. In this house, no one would be sent to the attic. No one would be forgotten in the photo. No one would ever have to wonder if they were an afterthought. This wasn't just a building, it was a declaration, and I had built it. We held a small gathering that weekend, a ribbon cutting for the first residents and their families. There were speeches, balloons, cupcakes, and a small local press crew. I gave a short address about design and equity, but I kept it simple. I don't believe architecture should only be about aesthetics or ambition. I said, it should be about healing, about giving people space to become who they're meant to be. People clapped. Emma squeezed my arm. Grandpa wiped the corner of his eye discreetly. Later, after the crowd dispersed, I walked the courtyard alone, and that's when I saw him. Eli. He was standing just outside the main gate, one hand in his pocket, his hoodie zipped up tight despite the mild spring air. His eyes flicked up when he noticed me. I stopped. He stepped forward. I wasn't sure you'd recognize me. I did, I said quietly. He looked older, not in the way time makes you older, but in the way consequence does. There was no swagger in his walk, no entitlement in his stance. I saw the article, he said, jerking his chin toward the banner still flapping in the breeze. About you, about this place. Thought I should come see it myself. I didn't speak. He glanced down, then met my eyes again. It's incredible. I gave a small nod. Thank you. Silence stretched between us, but it wasn't sharp, just real. I got a job, he said suddenly, at a hardware store. Been there almost a year. I'm taking night classes. Not sure for what yet, just something. I waited. Let him take his time. He licked his lips. I wanted to say sorry, again. I know it probably doesn't mean much, but I've been carrying it around what I said to you. What I didn't say? What I believed about you because they told me to. I looked at him, really looked. There was something true in his voice, something tired. I believe you, I said, but I'm not here to make you feel better. Eli, I know, he said. I just wanted you to know I remember, and I see you now. That last line pierced me, for a long time. All I had wanted was to be seen. Now that I was, it no longer felt like a necessity. It felt like peace. Take care of yourself, I said softly. I will. He turned to go, but paused. Evelyn, yes, you built something beautiful. Then he walked away. I stood still for a long while after he left. Not because I was shaken, but because I was whole. That night, back at home, Grandpa and I shared dinner in the garden. The red tulips had just started blooming, and the air carried a soft bite of the last fading cold. I told him about Eli. He didn't comment right away, just poured me a second glass of wine and raised his own. To soft landings. He said, I lifted mine. To earned ones. Later, I went up to my room, the same room that once felt too big for a girl who'd only ever had a mattress in the attic, and pulled out a journal I hadn't opened in months. Inside were pages full of scribbled thoughts, tear stains, old questions, and sketches of homes with big windows and long hallways. Some were crooked, some were beautiful. And at the very last page, I wrote, I am no longer the echo of someone else's story. I am the architect of my own. Months passed. The foundry expanded. More families moved in. I started mentoring younger architecture students, especially the ones who doubted they belonged in the room. I told them what I wished someone had told me when I was 18. You're not here to prove anything to anyone. You're here to build. That's enough. I didn't speak to Gregory again. After his letter, he never wrote back. I don't know where he lives now. I don't know if Candace stayed. I don't know if he watches the news and sees what I've built. But I do know this. He no longer has power over my story. And then, one spring afternoon, I found something unexpected in Grandpa's office. He'd gone out to run errands, and I was looking for a book I'd left behind on his shelf. While searching, I found a small wooden box tucked inside a drawer. Inside it were letters, dozens of them, all addressed to me. Birthday cards, postcards from Grandpa's travels, notes scribbled in fountain pen ink. Some were unopened. Others had tape on the seals, like someone had tried to repackage them. He had kept them all. Every letter that never made it into my hands. I sat down, pulled one out, and read Happy 13th. Evelyn, I hope the journal I sent inspires you to keep drawing. You have your mother's hands strong, gentle, and full of purpose. Love, Grandpa. Another, I know things must feel heavy right now, but you are not a burden. You are a gift. Never forget that. I read them all. Through tears, through laughter, through the ache of knowing what I had missed and the joy of knowing I had found it anyway. When Grandpa came home, I was still on the floor. The letters spread out around me like fallen leaves. He paused at the door, unsure. You found them, he said. I nodded. I kept them, he said simply, because I wanted you to know you were never forgotten. I looked up at him. You saved me, even when I didn't know it. He walked over and sat beside me. You saved yourself, years from now. If someone asks me where my story began, I'll tell them it didn't start with betrayal or loss. It started in the moment I chose to stop waiting for permission to matter. It started the moment I stopped asking for love from people who had none to give. The moment I stepped out of the attic, out of the background of the family photo, and into the light of my own becoming. I built a home inside myself. And then, I built one for others. That's legacy. That's family. That's me.